Hello YouTube, this is Neon, and today the subject of my talk is going to be sex-selective abortions. Sex-selective abortions are basically when women get sonograms and they find out it's a girl and they abort. So the vast majority of sex-selective abortions are girls being aborted. Since I'm pro-choice, it's a tough topic to talk about because pro-lifers or anti-abortion people, they try to talk about sex-selective abortions as we need to stop making abortions legal. That's their whole thing. Let's end abortion. Because that's all pro-lifers think about, is ending abortion. They don't think about a woman's rights to choose. They don't think about more social programs to help women who do choose to keep their babies but are poor. And they tend to judge women that have children and then maybe can't afford to take care of them, so they really need help from the state. So they want women to have children, but they don't want to help women take care of those children. Very, very contradictory with the pro-life movement. But they have addressed this issue in a way that I think is disingenuous, that's just not right and it's not correct. And I believe that feminists need to address this issue because it happens all over the world, and overwhelmingly it's girls who are aborted. And I certainly don't think it should have anything to do with limiting abortion or limiting access to abortion or limiting, when it's necessary, late or third trimester abortions when a woman and their doctor and her, the father decided that's the best thing for that late term abortion. I'm not talking about that, but I am talking about addressing this issue from a progressive standpoint. The only time I've heard a feminist address this issue to counter pro-life claims is that, well, it doesn't happen in the US. And I don't think that it does. I don't think that in any generation there's an inequity in terms of boys versus girls. Okay, I don't believe there is. However, I saw a documentary called, I believe, The Missing Girls of India. I will have a link below with the proper title. It is a BBC documentary. And they talk about this. India is a pro-choice nation. I believe, I may be wrong, that it's similar to the US, where women aren't questioned until the late part of the pregnancy is when there's limits that can be placed. I think, I may be wrong there. But in India, it's a problem. Sex-selective abortions is a problem. There's communities, rural communities, where the imbalance between male versus female has gotten to where for every 100 men, there's only 80 women. So there's literally not enough brides available for men. A huge problem. I'm not categorizing all of the beautiful, wonderful, intelligent people of India as being misogynists or not valuing women. There's many people of India, the government has made sex-selective abortions illegal. I believe the government has made, during the early parts of a woman's pregnancy, has made it illegal for doctors to reveal the gender of their unborn child. So the good government officials of India have addressed this issue, but in rural areas and many parts of India, it's not enforced. While OBGYNs and doctors who perform sonograms don't tell the gender, they're pretty good about following these laws. Oftentimes the nurses do. And they said that in spite of the fact that nurses they're not really as good at looking at the sonogram and telling the gender, nurses will still do it. And they said that sometimes the nurses get the gender wrong and they wind up aborting and it was a boy. So I want to talk a little bit about Indian culture. And if you have an American, a US mindset, I would recommend watching numerous videos on Indian culture because a lot of this won't sink in. Just because it's very different than our own culture. It's not better, it's not worse, it's just different. In India, it's very common that when a woman gets married, she is to live with the in-laws family. Right there, a lot of U.S. mindset and a lot of U.S. citizens' minds will shut down. Because for most women, living in the same home with their in-laws would be a nightmare, right? From a U.S. standpoint. As a result, in India, when a family marries off their daughter, they pay a dowry to the other family. And it's just sort of a cultural gesture of saying, we're going to bless you with these gifts, and you're going to take really good care of our daughter, right? Now, the bad thing is that sometimes, in some families, the families may demand very large payments and a very generous dowry. And the poor families of India, they can't afford to pay a dowry. Again, the good government officials of India have made dowries illegal. That you're going to marry my daughter and I'm going to pay you all this money. And it can be money, it can be gifts. And that can, for some families, not most, but for some Indian families, they will demand continually more money, sometimes years after their son has married the other family's daughter. So it can be corrupt in some cases, very corrupted. But again, even though the good Indian government officials have passed laws to make dowry payments illegal, it's such a part of Indian culture that most people still do it. You know, I've said that in the U.S. there's a lot of hiring discrimination against African Americans, even though it's illegal. And one thing that the private sector does is they pervert the law. In order to, in the process of applying, we're going to be asked our race. And when private sector jobs where they don't hire African Americans see the race, they use that to toss the application in the trash. They pervert the law. And in terms of the dowry system, sometimes people pervert that. In terms of the law of India, a lot of times, how do you go to each individual's home, and you're talking about more than 1 billion people in India, and try to enforce these laws when it is a cultural tradition that has gone back for probably many centuries. But they're working on fighting this. So in this documentary, they talk about girls being abandoned. Sometimes boys are abandoned, but more often than not it's girls. Sometimes girls are poisoned, sometimes girls are buried alive. There is a rather famous case where some boys happened across a girl who had been buried underground, and somehow they just, I don't know how, but they saw the ground was dug up and they decided to see what was buried there, and they found a little girl who was still breathing. She had not succumbed. And this little girl was rescued, survived, was named actually after an Indian goddess, the goddess of earth or something. I forget the exact name of the goddess or what exactly she was the goddess of. Okay, but she survived. They did find the father. It was interesting because the father really wasn't apologetic. He admitted to burying the girl. He had 7 daughters who he said, I can't afford to marry them off. I can't afford to pay dowries. This was in a rural area. He said that, you know, she survived. Okay, she survived. Adopt her off. Do whatever you want, but I can't take her. I can't afford the 7 daughters that I have now. So he did do time for his crime. He was in prison. I don't know how much time he got, but people in the community were very sympathetic to him. Not that they wanted her to be buried, this little angel, but that they were sympathetic to his, I guess, motives because of the poverty. And the fact that not only are you losing a child, you're having to pay out all of this money in gifts that many families can't afford or will become indebted forever just to marry off one daughter. So this has led to sex-selective abortions. When the laws are enforced in India in different areas, a stop is put to it. You know, people are prosecuted and the laws are enforced, but a lot of times the laws are not enforced. I don't want to pick on India. I'm not of Indian descent. And I believe that the people of India are beautiful and intelligent and wonderful people. The dowry system is illegal, as I understand it, in India, but it doesn't always, probably more often than not, it functions. And I know that there are women who say they're so happy with their in-laws that they love their mother-in-law more than they love their own biological mother. This is not a cultural critique on India. This is me saying that this is one example of where sex-selective abortions is really, it's been perverted. We want women to have the right to choose and to set out their destiny and to have safe and legal access to abortion always. But we don't want this to be twisted to where now female unborn girls are the ones being aborted. I do believe sex-selective abortions happen in the U.S. I don't know how often. I don't believe it's very often. Just based on the ratio of girls to boys seems to be fairly consistent and equal. And we have a slightly larger percentage of women in the U.S. than we do of males. So that also would suggest to me that there aren't many sex-selective abortions going on in the U.S., but probably that there are some. So I just would really, call out or plead with progressives, with women politicians on the progressive side, with feminists, with pro-choice activists, that they address this issue, because we know that it's caused problems in India, and it's causing problems in other parts of the world as well. I do believe that ultimately this is misogyny that's going on in India, or that it breeds misogyny, the fact that you have to pay someone in the process of getting your daughter married. Misogyny happens all over the place. It's a global phenomenon, and it is ubiquitous. One woman wrote a book about matriarchal societies. Some people actually will say there's no matriarchal societies. There never were. But if you look at Hawaii, if you look at Madagascar, if you look at other areas of the world, there were matriarchal societies in which women had a lot more clout and power than men. And this author suggested that European barbarians, Columbus and his cohorts, that as they went to destroy the world, the non-European world, they really destroyed any country that was matriarchal. They just didn't want to deal with it. One example would be Madagascar, where the ruler was always a queen, and then her oldest daughter would then take the crown. That new queen's oldest daughter eventually would take the crown. So that's one example of matriarchy. But this issue needs to be addressed. To see women of color being attacked in this way, from before the womb, is a little frightening to me. And I don't really know what to say, because I am totally pro-choice, and this doesn't change my mind about being pro-choice, but it does make me very sad to see that women of color, or that girls of any race, would be sort of targeted sometimes for abortion, just because people can't afford to have a girl, or people don't value a girl. It's unfortunate. It'd be interesting to see if there's any feminists or any other pro-choice activists that want to comment. I would love to hear your comments. I'm saying this for the umpteenth time. Please know I'm pro-choice. This is not a critique against abortion and abortion rights. I want abortion to stay safe and legal. Make no mistake. But that doesn't mean that progressives shouldn't acknowledge that sex-selective abortion is happening. Certainly, globally, it's happening in many places, and that they don't have a responsibility to talk about it and to address the issue. They're doing it in India. So, if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share, comment, watch a commercial, recommend my video to somebody else. Do one or more of those things. Thank you. Best wishes.